Hello, everybody. First, I'd like to say I'm well aware of the Scotland-Malawi connection because I was raising money for St Andrew's Medical School back in the noughties. And of course, there I saw the interchange of students between Malawi and Scotland in the medical practice, and I could see the value of that. So I understand, I have a good feeling for what's going on here. When I moved to fundraising, someone said, how do you do that? I mean, you're a marketing salesman. And I just said to them, they're the same thing. Fundraising is marketing and sales. What is your product? Who is your market? How are you going to convince them? What benefit are they going to get? What satisfaction out of the purchase? And is it value for money? And all those things come together to make the product that you're actually selling. It's not just passion. You've got to work your way through it. Now, I think one of the differences, of course, is that often in fundraising, the person who's buying doesn't actually get to sample the product. You're selling them something else. You're selling them a concept, ideas, big ideas. But the first thing you've got to understand is with an idea, what you've got is something with not actually a boundary. And Steve actually really referred that because people approach the same idea from different angles. So the absolutely key thing that you've got to be able to do is to understand that person. I call it whiffen. What's in it for me? And I stand in the other person's shoes and I try and think, what is it they want? And only when you know that can you start a conversation. I've seen plenty of fundraisers enthusiastically talking about their product, about what they're going to do, what it's going to help. They've never found out in the first instance whether the person standing in front of them is interested or not. They may be just wasting their breath. The second thing is that an idea doesn't have a boundary, it's flexible, it can be as big as you like. In fact, I always just say dream big. The bigger the vision, the more excited people are, the more excited you are, because if you're not excited, then they're not going to be excited and they're not going to buy. Just looking at something like that, I mean, I'm sure I don't know, but I'm sure someone here will be raising money for a school, for instance, in Malawi, or for something like that. You're not actually really raising money for a school, you're raising money for an idea. You're raising money for education. You're raising money for the kid that's going to be sitting in there with that opportunity who eventually becomes a Nobel Prize winner. That's what you're doing. And that is, as it were, expanding the idea into something that makes people think, yes, this is really exciting. The first project I worked on was Donaldson's College for the Deaf, back in the 90s. And it needed substantial repairs, alterations, roof, windows, stonework, whatever you like. It's one of the classic buildings, it's an iconic building, and surely everyone should actually want to make that building right again so it sits there in its proper historic context. But of course, you ask the Church of Scotland the same question. They've got so many other buildings just like that, all iconic, all needing repair. So how are you going to make yourself stand out? How are you going to be different? You need an idea. At that point, well, I'll tell you, Edinburgh had the first deaf school in the world, the Braidwood School, down at Dummy Dykes. That's why it's called that. Donaldson's was the first, was the oldest existing school still sitting on its own site. It was also the first school where both deaf and hearing kids were educated together. It was inclusive. At that stage, the internet was coming into existence. The potential was being seen. And for the first time in their life, deaf people could actually talk to someone who wasn't in the same room as them. Amazing opportunities, amazing possibilities. And so when we were looking at the repair of the building, we thought, what is it going to be used for? And we saw it basically as an international centre of excellence for deaf studies, the visible symbol of an invisible disability. And we raised money because we had an idea. I know ideas change, things move, but the idea at the time hit the zeitgeist. One of the things when I was raising money for that school was I wrote to a well-known trust in Scotland, and I gave them our story and what we were trying to achieve. And a week later, I got back an envelope, and I could recognize that it came back from the trust, and I said, oh, well, that's them telling us that we're you're going to be considered, or the timescales and get that. And I opened the envelope, and out of it fell a cheque for 285,000 quid. And that's about 500 nowadays. But I was absolutely gobsmacked. But it took me 3 years to find out why that had happened. And when we had our open day and thanked everyone, and they all came to see what we'd done at Donaldson's, I met the chairman of the trust and discovered he was actually very significantly affected by hearing loss. And what he had seen, and what he saw and what we were doing, was help for deaf people. And I'm saying, that made the connection. It was fortunate, but the connection was made. Steve referred that. You've got to tell a story which relates and interests people. And that's one. And another, if I can just say, over the road here, St Giles, which I worked on for the new disabled access as it was then, and for the interior lighting. What was with the lighting? I talked to the Heritage Lottery people and I said, you can't see inside here. No one can actually understand the cathedral. And they said, well, I don't think we're into lighting. We're into buildings and preserving buildings for people's history so they can understand what's going on with the building, its history and all that. And at that moment, I mean, on a day like today, the choir would come in and bring torches so they could actually read what they were looking at. So lighting was so chronic. And I stood there with the Heritage Lottery and the Historic Scotland people, and at that moment, this tour guide came up with a small group of people. And he stood fairly close to us, and he took out a torch. And he went, so up there, you can see that plaque there, well, that relates to the Montrose, and then this one here, and that there. And I just turned to him and said, well, I didn't put this on, but I think that tells you, if you can't see your history, please give us some money. And they did, eventually, after a while. And the only thing I'm sorry about is I couldn't actually find that guide again, because I'd have taken his torch, I'd have put it in a little box, and I'd have put a sign under it saying, this torch is worth £1 million. So, I mean, I was lucky again. I don't know, maybe my whole career's been lucky. I just want to talk about something else, which in fundraising is quite often a barrier to people. It's the fear of asking. People find, you know, when you've got to that point where you actually had to say, please give me money. And you don't want to hear the no, and we hear no too many times in fundraising, that's a fact. You don't want to hear no, and you're just feeling, you're asking them to do you a favour. The phrase begging letter, which I've heard often, is just write it out of the book. Because they're not going to do you a favour, you're going to do them a favour. You're giving them an opportunity to participate in something which will make them feel better, which is worthwhile, which is good for humanity. You're actually doing them the favour of making them feel good about themselves. I don't know if all of you know Rob Burrows, rugby league player who died of motor neuron disease very recently, and his great friend Kevin Sinfield, who has done the most amazing amount of marathons and, you know, real hardcore work for him. And someone interviewed him and said, Kevin, there must be so many people who are grateful to you for what you're doing and what you've done. And he said, on the contrary, he said, I'm grateful to them because they've given me the opportunity to do something really meaningful with my life, to contribute to something which is going to matter so much for so many people. And if I say it, to make myself feel good about myself. So what you're doing, you're making other people feel good. They're going to see, if you have the right dream, that they're contributing to something really important. And I'd just like to close with the most important words in fundraising. Henry Ford knew that the most likely person to buy a car from him was somebody who'd already bought a car from him. So he spent a lot of time making sure that that person was well looked after, their car properly serviced, and that they were given very, very good attention, customer service, basically. In fundraising, the most likely person to give you some money is someone who's done it before. So they are very valuable to you. And the two words that are most important for you to say are thank you. Appreciate you. I'm really so glad what you've done for us, how you've helped us. And you keep that person engaged. And it's amazing how many organizations I've seen where somehow the donors get lost or don't get appreciated. If you do that, then you have that hard core, the support behind you, and you can build with them that team that's going to make you a success. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed speaking to you. I just want to say, oh, you put those up for me already. Okay, I didn't even look at that, so that's what went wrong. Anyway, thank you.